Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah Show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call. 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalai. I'm your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicks off this hour. Chaz starts us off from New York. Hey, Chaz, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
No, I'm going to make your night because I'm combining two of your favorite hobbies right now.
Okay.
Linux and ham radio.
Yay! That's awesome. You, what do you got going on? Tell me about that story. How did you get pulled into the ham radio? You were always kind of into Linux. Did we convince you on the show? Did you just find extra time with COVID and decide why not talk to people all the way around the world for free?
Actually, COVID has canceled all of the testing in my area for the foreseeable future, which is a real bummer because I was a week away from taking my general.
You know what, man? Let me share some encouragement with you. I've actually seen some discussions on this on some of the Facebook groups that exist for ham radio and some of the online forums. One of the reasons that I very proudly announce that I'm a ham radio operator, and one of the reasons that everybody that is a ham radio operator tends to talk to other ham radio operators is because we have a shared love of the evolution of technology. We like embracing new technology and pushing technology to its limits. And so believe me when I tell you, if there is ever a group on the history of the planet that will immediately get around the idea of learning how to do these kinds of things remotely to include testing, it will be ham radio operators. It took my local club 72 hours to make a decision that they were going to go from doing regular meetings to they were going to do them over the air. And so we have a net every Monday night, which I actually run. And we went from that to the meetings, which are usually on Tuesdays. They're just going to do them over the air. And they tried it, and first try went off without a hitch, no problems, right? Like, that's what we're good at. We, as ham radio operators, if we're good at nothing else, we are good at pushing technology to its limits and trying to find what we can do with those things. That's what the entire hobby is about. So I would imagine that if you can't take the test today, you're going to be able to take it very soon, either because this whole COVID thing is going to start to wind down, or because ham radio operators are going to embrace technology and learn different ways to facilitate that testing. But be that as it may, what do you have going on tonight?
So, obviously, I've done my reinstalls of 2004. I've got Kubuntu on my main X270 and Xubuntu on my lighter 11E.
Okay.
And I used for 1804. I was using a software called Chirp to program my Baofeng UV 5X3 or whatever the tri-band nomenclature is, and. So obviously I do a complete reinstall whenever 2 years rolls around, and I had to re-add the repository for Chirp. And for some strange reason, when I get to the sudo apt install Chirp daily, it says that they're unable to locate the package, which confuses me because if we come over to Launchpad, it looks like the repository was updated for 2004 as recently as the 30th of April. So do I just need to find a new programming software for?
No, you don't want to find you don't want to find a new programming software because Chirp is by far the standard when it comes to that's not just even true for Linux. Chirp is the go-to programming software for Windows and Mac. So I wouldn't recommend that you do that. I just went to their site. This is, by the way, Chaz, this is why I have a dedicated computer specifically for ham radio, is primarily because I don't want to deal with these kinds of issues when something new pops up, when a new operating system comes out, new version comes out. it takes me literally off the air while I wait to get some of these things done. Now, I looked up at, I think at what you're looking at, and it looks like I don't actually see from the PPA right from their site. I actually don't see a push or an update since 2013. So maybe I'm misreading that, or maybe you found a different Oh no, yeah, you're right. Well, yeah, successfully built, but the last time it was updated or pushed looks like it was back in 2013. So I tell you what I'll do, Chaz. I can reach out to them and just ask, if there's any updates to get that to 2004. And then if I'm wrong about it, they'll obviously tell me, and perhaps you're seeing something I'm not. The other thing we could do is, now that you and I have had this discussion on the air, there's probably a number of ham radio operators that also function as developers that may be able to look into this and go, how do we get that to run on 2004?
Yeah, that'd be great. What's your call sign too? Just so
KC0SKE. KC0SKE.
All right, I'm KD2TMR, and if I ever hear you on a repeater, I'll make sure I say hi.
You bet. You bet. I appreciate you calling in. 73s. Open phones this hour, 855-450-NOAA. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. We'll go to our interactive mumble room where Pi Crash is hanging out. Hey, Pi Crash, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hello, Noah. Good afternoon.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. Self-isolating, as we should.
Yep.
I got a question. I used to use Wunderlist for all my to-do lists and stuff like that. And of course, the service is dead today or tomorrow will be dead. And I wanted to move to something else. I found Todoist. That's a really cool service. But the problem is I'm still not owning my data. I mean, I wanted to see if is there something like self-hosted or something like that, or just keep with Todoist. I don't know, what's your recommendation? So
let's back up a little bit. So first things first, if you have used Wunderlist, which is a pretty decent actually to-do list app, and I had used it for a while on Android. You got an email this last week or the week before that said, hey, they're shutting down, and you have until, and they give you the date, how long to get your data off of their service before they shut it down. By far, bar none, if you want the best experience for a to-do app, that is Todoist, by far. The level of integration that Todoist has and the capabilities that Todoist has is absolutely fantastic. And I'll be the first person to tell you that where I actually learned about Todoist was from my wife. She was evaluating different to-do apps and said that this one takes the cake. And we've actually recommended it to clients because of the integration with other services and such. So if you want the best experience, being able to type, for example, 9 a.m. tomorrow, I have a meeting with so-and-so, and it will automatically figure out that 9 a.m. is the time, and tomorrow is the thing that it has to send you the reminder, and figures all that out. Todoist is the way to go. It also provides functionality for sync and so on and so forth. If you're looking for the best Todoist task app, Todoist is it. Having said that, I'm with you. I would prefer to keep my data to myself. What I've been using is OwnCloud Tasks. Is it as featureful and powerful as Todoist? Absolutely not. Is there a maintenance overhead because you are hosting the service yourself? Absolutely. But if you want to keep your data on your own server, and to be fair, there are a couple of things that we have, email, to-do lists, those kinds of things are so personal in nature, man. If there was anything I wanted to get off the cloud, my to-do list would be one of them. So I'd recommend you check out I said OwnCloud, I'm sorry, Nextcloud, the tasks integration. And also what I found is once you get Nextcloud set up, no matter what you start with, because I actually started with their I forget what the name of it is, but it is a Nextcloud Talk, their integration, or their competitor to Slack. And I started with that, and I've just kind of been adding stuff over time. Oh, Nextcloud can do this. Oh, Nextcloud can do that. And it really is a personal cloud, a one-stop shop personal cloud. And I have to tell you, it used to be like a half-day job to get Nextcloud set up. No, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but there was a tremendous commitment that was required in order to get Nextcloud set up. These days, it's literally a function of installing the Snap package, and everything just basically works. You want SSL? It's like one additional command. So that's what I would recommend if you want to get your data off the cloud.
Okay, I will try it out. I probably find it. They have a Docker image, the Linux Server IO guy, so I will try that probably.
Sounds good. Let us know. Come back if you have any questions, all right?
Okay, thank you.
Again, 855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. So I have been, if you've listened to the show for the past year or so, you might have picked up on this. I've mentioned little hints. I haven't really talked about it outright, but I'm kind of going through a data reorganization stage of my life. Essentially, I decided it was time to, I don't even remember what the catalyst for this was. I think it was originally we just wanted to get some movies for the kids, and the kids were looking for a movie and said, "Dad, we don't have this movie." I thought, I'm not rebuying that. I already ripped that. And I looked, oh yeah, that's on this NAS or that NAS. And essentially what had happened is, over the course of my life, every time I would purchase a new NAS or anytime I would build a new NAS, I'd take the old one out of production. I'd move the data that I needed immediately. And then as I needed stuff, I'd pull it back over. And then eventually I would just dump all the rest of the data that I wasn't using to drives and throw them in a Pelican case and label them for the date that I pulled them out. And that was my system. And it's just, that's how I stored extraneous data. It's of course important stuff I had backed up. But there really was no master plan. And at some point late last year, early this year, my wife and I just kind of started looking around at all these cases. And I mean, there were a lot of them. I can't be any more honest than that. And she just said, this is a problem. This has to change. And I said, all right. So we went through and I rebuilt a new NAS with 10 terabyte drives, which is the, as I explained on the episode at the time I did that, is the least expensive drive that you can get the most storage on. Built out a new NAS and just started one by one going through cases and start pulling in data from most current to least current. And I'm finally getting down to the very bottom. And one of the things that I came across was that I still have every paper I ever wrote in high school, every paper I ever wrote in college, every project I was ever assigned. And the thing about that is that data particularly useful to me right now? No. But there's something to be said about, if you're going to do something in life, you may as well have access to it later on down the road. And I remember the moment that hit me. I actually went on the air and said something to the effect of, how many of you have downloaded a file and then deleted the file full and well knowing that as you're deleting the file, this is something that you're going to have to re-download again. And so I've just been trying to organize these things. And I found tremendous value in being able to go back and look and say, oh, here's the pictures from this time, and here's the document that shows this. And I was able to piece together a couple of dates, and it was a very encouraging experience. Well, I got down to my mini DV tape collection. They're home videos of my kids and my wedding when my wife and I got married. And I had all of these, but I never look at them or show them to anybody, because who has a mini DV player that you can play? And I was actually a split collection. Half of them were mini DV and half of them were some of them were mini DV, some of them were high 8, some of them were digital 8. Stay with me, there's a point here. I started to look at, how am I going to ingest all of this data into my computer? And one of the things that I've always been good at, or tried to be cognizant of, is preserving things in the highest possible quality at the time. So back in 1998 or 1999 or whenever I recorded most of these, I wanted to purchase the highest quality I could. And at the time, that was digital videotapes. And so I started to look for what tools were available to migrate all of this data into a regular video file that I could store on my NAS. And I came across dvgrab. Now, they say the blacksmith's children have no shoes. That is certainly the case at my house with IT, right? Because I'm so busy fixing and migrating data for other people. It's just something I've kind of kicked to the curb. And so as I've kind of gone through organizing my digital life, I decided that I wanted to move all of these tapes in. So I fired up dvgrab, stuck a tape in a DV player, and connected it to an i3 4 port, which, by the way, if you're looking for a really great laptop to do this, the Dell D820, they sell for like $35, $55 on eBay. They have that little FireWire port right built into the computer. So I just loaded it with Kubuntu and installed dvgrab from the repo. Man, is that slick. You type dvgrab, it dumps the videotape into a digital video file. And then you can open that up. You can use FFmpeg to transcode it to whatever it is you need. Absolutely fantastic, and a great way to archive all of your footage. And so I combined that, of course, with ZFS and FreeNAS, which is what I'm using to store all of this, with a really good backup strategy. And I'm very excited that these open source tools exist to pull data in. And so if you have any mini DV tapes, they also work with analog tapes, by the way. I told you I had some high 8 tapes. I took high 8 tapes, I put them into a digital 8 camcorder, which had a mini DV port, and the camcorder actually has a I don't know what you would call it, I guess a digitizer that will take that analog video and turn it into digital video. And they actually have some special filtering inside of the camera that doesn't exist on some of the outboard high 8 players. And so I was able to get a really good copy of even those analog phones. They look really good for being, in some cases, almost 20 years old. DV Grab, it's in the repos. Check it out if you have any old videos. Get those things into a modern file format that you can keep and archive forever. Again, 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. George calls us from New York. Hey, George, welcome to the Ask Noah Show.
Hey, Noah, how's it going?
Better than I deserve. What can I do for you?
Well, two things. One, I just want to say, I know it's technically a different show. I have to thank you for the Destination Linux episode where you talked to Jill about old tech, because you mentioned the Sony MO disc.
Yeah, magneto-optical
disc. I was like, oh my god, that was like, such a nerdy thing, because I was like, that was just, I believe, I'm probably going to get flamed for this if I'm wrong. I think that was the same disc from Mission Impossible that they put the knock list on.
Yes, it is. As he comes through that is 100% accurate. As he comes through the ceiling, he comes down and he puts it in his mouth. And that was an MO disc. And it's funny too, because it's one of those things, I never know how far to go into retro tech, because it's personally exceedingly interesting to me. I have a whole room at my office where I have old computers and old drives, and because I just like playing with them, I just think they're fun. But and I show them to people or talk about them, I can just watch people's eyes glaze over. And the thing is, back at that time, iOmega really put a foot in SideQuest's nose just to say, hey, we're going to stomp you out. And they did some really dirty things with the driver to make it so that if you had an iOmega zip drive or an iOmega Jazz drive, if you wanted the 250 meg, that you couldn't use the SideQuest, which was actually a better drive because it was basically little hard disks inside of there. And then, of course, the Sony MO disks, which came around the same time, but were a slightly different format and for a slightly different purpose. But I still have my Sony MO drives, as I have a bunch of MO disks, zip disks, SideQuest disks, and I still play with them from time to time because they make me happy.
I found one an old zip drive at my job, and I was like, I just need to get a cable to connect it. But I was like, I really want to play with that.
Yeah,
I kind of miss these.
If I remember right, the SideQuest drive was a parallel connection. The iOmega drive just used regular USB, but the MO drive actually is a SCSI interface, and so you have to have a PCI SCSI card. And I keep a couple of those kicking around too, so that I can connect all of this old stuff back up.
Yeah, no, I was just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Mission Impossible 1, that was a good catch.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh my god, I'd look it up to make sure I was right, and I was like, okay, no, I'm right. And also the behind the scenes episode, is there a possibility that you could actually do like a video of your broadcast rig? Because like you were mentioning things, and I was just like, okay, I know what that is. I don't know what that is.
Which the one that I'm using, the one that I'm using for Ask Noah?
Yes.
I'll tell you what. You go check out the YouTube video after this airs, and you'll see it. I have a camera here. I don't want to use it very much, but basically what it is there's an IP mixer, and this thing actually has no cables that runs into it. There's just a gigantic not even gigantic. There's just a single Ethernet cable that's plugged into it. There's no microphones, no headphones, nothing, but everything operates in real time. And then the sources can just be assigned. So I can tap on the board and scroll through and pick a source, and then that source becomes active, and I can use it. And so it's a very dynamic board. It was a very expensive system, but it does a lot for me and allows me to do a show on the fly without having to pay attention to a lot, and so I can kind of do it by myself, and that's always kind of important. You know, maybe we may end up introducing video back in. That was always kind of the plan, and I just kind of never got around to it. So, but yeah, if you check out the YouTube video when the episode gets posted, you can see a picture of it, and then I'll just because we're this far into this, the rack sits over to my left, and the rack is what. The rack is what has all of the other equipment. So this is what has like our broadcast delay and the network recorder, and we've got some remote codecs that allow us to get into the studio remotely and stuff like that. And of course, they can be anywhere in the building because they're all running over IP. They're not actually, again, nothing's actually plugged into the mixer. It's all just audio over IP.
That is, yeah. When you were talking about it, I was like, okay, this is so cool. Like, totally nerd out on this. But I actually do have a question.
Okay.
Besides the nerding out part, it's dealing with like a Bluetooth. I have a Bluetooth headset. If the exact model is a Sony MDR 180N, and I noticed that when I was using it, I was trying to use it for like Zoom chats and stuff like that, and I noticed that I can select it for like the audio, like for the headset, or for the headphones, but I can't select it as a audio source to use as like the mic.
Right.
But I did notice that when I switched it to the HSP mode, the quality gets crappier, but it picks up the headset. Is there a way to get to connect the mic and still get the good quality?
You know, I'll be honest with you. Bluetooth headsets have a long way to go for real-time audio. They're okay. They're great for listening to music. They're actually pretty decent for doing like phone calls type stuff. But when you start getting into real time, especially when you want it to sync up with video, it gets pretty dicey. And I'd be lying to you if I told you that it was a particularly great experience on Linux. We've made a lot of progress in the past few years, but we still have a long ways to go. I have 3 different wireless headsets that I use with my computer on a regular basis, and by far, the one that I've had the best luck with is my Plantronics one. The other 2, to include one Sony, I have audio delay issues, audio lag issues, and so I don't really have a good answer for you. There's one other thing you can try. DOSGeek actually recommended a Bluetooth adapter. That works very, very well, and that actually solved my Bluetooth delay issue on my home computer. But I haven't actually gotten around to purchasing one for my work one, so I can't tell you if that would fix it on everything, but it's something certainly you could try.
All right, so what you're saying is a Bluetooth headset a USB headset would probably solve most of my problems. Oh,
absolutely. Absolutely it will. In fact, again, going back to Plantronics, their USB headsets sound so good, and Aventry, that's the one. So I'll put this in the show notes for you. The USB headsets that Plantronics have are of such high quality and do such a good job that I have a hard time going away from them. In fact, I've actually done a couple of shows. I've actually done broadcasts over them. The audio is that good.
Yeah, no, Plantronics, that they've been in the game for a while. Like, I've definitely heard of them. Like, they're pretty good.
They're the ones that make the communication headsets for the astronauts. That's kind of a good qualification to have on your CV, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's I don't think anyone else can say that.
All right. I got to let you go, man, because
Thanks.
Yep. I appreciate you calling. 855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. My next guest is Kris Moore. He's been on the show before. We asked him back because a new release of FreeNAS is coming out, and Kris is going to give us a skinny on what is new in this release. There's a ton of new features. We have new encryption features. We heard us talk to Alan Jude a couple of weeks ago, and this per dataset encryption key is fascinating to me. So we have a little bit of noise on the line. We're going to try and work through that. And you'll just have to bear with us because Kris is working out of his home and he has servers in his home. And so that's just something that we're going to have to deal with. So without further ado, Kris Moore from IX Systems, welcome back into the program, sir. I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me again, Noah. Really appreciate it.
IX Systems is going through somewhat of a transition with FreeNAS. For those that aren't familiar, tell me what's changing with FreeNAS.
Sure. So you're alluding, of course, to the big name change announcement that we've made, and I'm sure everyone's talking about. So let me go through a little bit of the background on it. So everyone, of course, knows FreeNAS. Been around a long time. That name has been with us since the early days of the invention of FreeNAS. It kind of a play on FreeBSD as well, so showing a little bit of that legacy there. But as many people know, IX Systems, the company behind FreeNAS, also has this other product called TrueNAS. So that's the commercial product. That's the big system. That's what pays the bills. That's how we make sure all our engineers get paid, and we can continue developing FreeNAS. So over the last, we'll say 10-ish years at this point, we've been maintaining both products. So you have a FreeNAS, you have a TrueNAS. Code-wise, they're very similar. TrueNAS is more of a superset of FreeNAS. So it's the FreeNAS code plus a Git overlay, a couple Git overlays, adding some features, adding HA, adding some custom stuff for hardware, of course, enclosure management, all those good things you need on the enterprise side. Well, that's been interesting on the engineering side and a bit of a challenge over the years because it means we have to almost duplicate all the work we do twice. I mean, we do a FreeNAS release. Okay, great. Now we have to go ahead and roll the TrueNAS release. Great. We have to test the exact same things all over again. Did the overlay or any of the code changes that came into a TrueNAS affect anything, break anything? Does it operate differently? Same thing with documentation. We have to go and document FreeNAS and document how that all works, and then document TrueNAS, and it's still 90% the same software at the end of the day. I mean, creating a pool is identical on both, but it just required two sets of operations for each product, and they tend to lag. TrueNAS lagged a little bit behind the FreeNAS, which is a little bit more bleeding edge. So in recent years, that's something we've been aware has been a challenge for us as a company. It's really difficult to have that kind of split brain syndrome where it's like two of almost the exact same thing, and you're having to constantly qualify, I'm talking about TrueNAS here. I'm talking about FreeNAS 9.3, not TrueNAS. I mean, it can be really confusing, especially now that TrueNAS has grown and IX has grown, and we have a lot of customers, TrueNAS customers, who run both. So the conversation's constantly, you're using a FreeNAS in your environment and you're using that TrueNAS. Okay, which version? That's the FreeNAS version. Okay, how about the TrueNAS version, etc. So it's been apparent to us we've needed to unify for quite some time now, and a couple months, we decided a few months back, a lot of conversation about it, all the details involved therein, and then we just made the announcement not too long ago that you're referring to.
What are the code change prior to the name change? What were the code differences between FreeNAS and TrueNAS?
So on FreeNAS and TrueNAS, it's the same OS. So at the end of the day, you still have the same FreeBSD base under it. We might compile different drivers in on the TrueNAS side to support some of our hardware. We may ship with some different software ports and packages on the TrueNAS side to support some different enterprise-y things, like our enclosure management is a good example. Of course, we have HA in TrueNAS. For those who don't know, TrueNAS comes in a dual controller variety, so you can fail over and have high availability within one chassis. So a lot of code differences there to support that. There's a lot of things that just sound simple, like, yeah, sure, we'll just make it HA, but that has to touch a lot of things in the core middleware of FreeNAS, TrueNAS, if you will. I mean, everything has to be accounted for, even bringing up Samba on the passive controller. Okay, got to bring it back to directory, got to do this, got to do that. There's a lot of things that have to account for that HA component, and that's really critical and vital to our enterprise product. Aside from that, there's been other things, support for fiber channel being one. We have a lot of tunings and special tweaks for our own hardware because, again, we built the hardware, we performance tested it, we can just dial it in to get you the best performance and best bang for your buck. And some other visual things as well. Proactive support was a big section of code as well. One of the things TrueNAS does is it has the ability to reach out to us at IX Systems if you're in support, and it'll phone home basically and tell us when a drive's about to fail or if there's been an alert on the system, so we can proactively reach out to the contact of the company and say, hey, we're going to ship you a new drive. You need to go pop that in the system or have remote hands do it. So mostly things of that nature.
Is that phoning home feature that calls and allows you to give customers those alerts, is that something that has to be set up, or does that come enabled by default when you purchase a TrueNAS product?
It's something you turn on during the setup process. So if you have a support contract, a gold contract with us, Most people are going to opt for that. Not everyone does. Obviously, we have a lot of TrueNAS in secure environments. They're air gapped, so they can't use a feature like that, which is fine. But a lot of customers opt for that because they just want that kind of white glove treatment where they know that we're monitoring the system as well and making sure that it's going to stay healthy for them.
Are there any other big changes that are coming out with the next release of FreeNAS and TrueNAS? Obviously, there's probably a ton of attention that is being focused on unifying these two products, but what are some of the new features that are coming out?
Sure. So let's talk about 12. So that's going to be the first release of the new unified image, what we're calling TrueNAS Core and TrueNAS Enterprise. So TrueNAS Core, of course, is FreeNAS in every way, shape, and form. One common thing, and I'm just going to address it right now, is we've heard a little bit of, they're taking it and calling it TrueNAS Core, so it's going to lose functionality or similar concern. Well, let me just assure everyone that's not the case here at all. Everything you do today on FreeNAS, you can do on TrueNAS Core, and more actually. If anything, we've open sourced more of the source code by putting some of the enterprise bits back into what is or what was FreeNAS. So TrueNAS Core 12, let's go over some of the big things that are coming, and probably the biggest one people are aware of is the new OpenZFS work we've done. So going back a little bit here, so ZFS on FreeBSD up till now has lagged a little bit behind ZFS on Linux in that case. And then OpenZFS, of course, followed the Lumos branch. Well, IX undertook about year and a half ago a big effort to basically bring FreeBSD support into the ZFS on Linux mainstream repository. That, one thing led to another, lots of stuff happened, and what ended up ultimately coming out of that is they ended up converting ZFS on Linux and just calling it OpenZFS now. So that is the true upstream source of truth, and now FreeBSD is the same first-class citizen that Linux was with ZFS on Linux. Some of the features that we're going to be exposing on the TrueNAS Core side, the one I'm probably most excited for is native encryption. That's something we've had a lot of people who've wanted for quite a while now. Historically in FreeNAS, the way you did crypto was you'd use jelly encryption, which is at the drive layer. So you did that underneath your Z pool, which is great, for encryption at rest. If you need to go chuck a drive in the trash or ship it, great, good encryption for that. Where it didn't really help you is when you needed to do things like replication. That was always interesting because at that layer you're unencrypted and you're sending just your unencrypted data set across the wire, which hopefully is over SSH, so it's encrypted in transit, but then you got to trust the remote system as well. Well, having native crypto in ZFS is a lot more interesting if you're in that situation where you want to lock specific data sets with specific encryption keys. If you'd like to be able to replicate to environments that you may not particularly trust or have full control over, you can now do that and not actually send the replication key to the remote side. So you can send the encrypted stream, receive the encrypted stream, and never once have to unlock it on the remote, which is potentially very interesting. Lots of neat stuff you can do. Plus, you don't want the penalty of always having to encrypt the whole pool. There's a lot of people who want a data set encrypted but don't want to have the whole pool encrypted because some's private, some's not. So that's potentially a very interesting feature. Another one that we're calling fusion pools is an interesting feature. So let me explain what that means. So that's kind of the marketing term we at IX have come up with for special allocation classes in ZFS, which when I say that doesn't mean a lot to many people. Like, special what? What does that mean? So basically what they've done is in ZFS, in the new OpenZFS we're about to include, you have the ability to create a VDEV that's dedicated to metadata information or small block I/O. Dedupe tables can also go on there. So where that would be interesting is, say you have a pool and it's full of spinning disks, but you have a couple SSDs, NVMe, whatever. You can go ahead and basically come up with kind of a best of both worlds scenario where you can now put all the metadata on the flash or on the really fast media, and that helps improve just ZFS performance overall. Your bigger blocks still end up on the spinning media, but we've accelerated everything else. So that's a really potentially interesting thing as well. And there's just been many years of tweaks and fixes, and we've seen some performance wins as well on the ZFS on Linux side, and we'll be getting all those in TrueNAS Core. So lots of goodies coming on that side of the table.
Let's talk a little bit more about the native encryption. So my understanding is this will allow you to essentially pair a separate key per data set. Is that correct?
Correct. So for those who are FreeNAS users today, when you go to Core, in your storage page where you can go and monitor your pool, create, delete data sets, you'll have some new options. So you create your pool the way you normally do, great. But when you go to create a data set, you can now have an encryption option where you can click and say, I'd like to enable encryption, put in a passphrase or key, and turn that on for just that one data set. You can also have sub-data sets inherit that parent's encryption as well, or potentially not, or use a different set of keys. So there's lots of ways to nest and do some really neat things and manage your setup the exact way you want it.
How difficult is it to load and unload the keys dynamically? Is it something that has to be done by a system administrator as kind of a, when they turn the system on, they go ahead and enable the encryption for that pool and then it's unlocked and everybody's using it? Or is it designed to be used such that maybe I have a law office and the law office has a separate case, and so they can use a separate data set for each case, which would allow them to then destroy the key and thus, quote-unquote, erase the data in the event that they were legally required to do so? Is it designed for that kind of dynamic use, or is it really kind of designed to be set up and left?
No, absolutely. And so just to be clear, when you reboot the system or power on, power off, whatever, it's going to go ahead and prompt you kind of the way Jelly does today when you want to go ahead and unlock those volumes. So, and you can manage them a few different ways. But in the case you're describing, I use different keys, one for different sets of customer data or different legal clients. You can basically destroy the data set, and as long as you haven't exposed that key anywhere, you can trust that it's basically been securely erased. So that's definitely supported. Another feature we've done, now this is more on the enterprise side, is we're adding KMIP support, which is a key management. So that's going to allow you to plug into, if you're a business and have a KMIP server, we can actually have TrueNAS reach out, talk to the KMIP server, and request keys from there, so you get the full auditing. So you can monitor who's requesting what and when. So there's some other neat things we can do on the enterprise side. But for core users, yeah, it's going to look and feel very similar to the existing encryption, except done on a per data set level.
Is it possible to store the key outside of FreeNAS? Let's say, for example, that you say to yourself, I trust for the most part my passphrase to keep the key secure, but at the same time, since I'm only using this data set once in a great moon, I would really like to keep the key, the private key for the data set, on a flash drive somewhere and only connect it when I need it. Is that something that can be done?
Yeah, you absolutely will want to do that. You'll get prompted to go ahead and back up those keys when you create them. So yeah, I would take good caution with those, keep them as secure as you need to, but that's absolutely something you could probably do or want to do.
They can be backed up to a flash drive. Is it possible to erase them off of the FreeNAS box itself so that without that flash drive present, it is not possible to decrypt the data? Is that a possibility?
Yes. I'll have to go double check the implementation as we get a little closer here. I know deleting the data set is going to wipe the key. I think there's a way to rekey it as well, which will wipe the old key, but I will need to double check on how that is implemented, how far we've exposed that into the UI. There's obviously a lot of stuff under the hood if you want to go play at the ZFS, at the command prompt and go a little further.
Have you ever, have you looked into the possibility of tying this to any sort of two-factor authentication, perhaps like the YubiKey or the Nitro key, the ability to, obviously that's not obviously planned for this release, but is it something that you guys have considered down the road to where maybe when I go to unlock a data set, perhaps I have to have a second-factor authentication before it will allow me to decrypt that data?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's something we would love to add. So we're skirting that with 12.0. I didn't mention it, but we are adding Google two-factor authentication support to logging into the user interface. So that's kind of our first foray into bringing that two-factor auth in. But over time, we expect, again, things like that may come up where we want to add two-factor auth to specific sections within the UI as well. That's
fantastic. So this is something that's actively on the roadmap then?
Oh, yeah. Again, 12.0, we've already added the two-factor auth, so you can turn it on, use your Google Authenticator, and get those one-time passcodes to log into the UI. Of course, once you get in, you can do everything. So over time, we'll start making that more fine-grained.
Let me ask you this, Kris, from just a general user interface standpoint, do you design the FreeNAS UI for system administrators only to log in, or are there some valid uses to have some users with access to that web UI?
Typically, it's designed for the sysadmin. There's not a lot of things you want just your regular consumers doing in there, unless you want them provisioning data sets or making their own shares. That's not typically something we see people do in the real world. Usually, your sysadmin is going to be the one responsible for that. So, now, to go along with that, we have the companion product, that's TrueCommand. TrueCommand starts dipping its toe into where you're going here, which is more of that RBAC type solution where TrueCommand allows you to say, okay, user, you can log into TrueCommand, and we have given you certain sets of permissions to be able to see or have read-write access to certain TrueNASs or read-only to monitor. That's where we're going in that TrueCommand product to get to that place where you're talking about where each user can log in and do certain things.
The reason I ask, Kris, is as I think about how I would go about implementing this in a practical standpoint. If I'm setting it up for a law office or whatever, I could see a lot of users really wanting to take advantage of the fact that data can be encrypted and decrypted on the fly. Of course, they're not going to want to, and their IT administrator's not going to want them to funnel through those requests every time they want a data set encrypted or decrypted. So I guess is the general consensus at IX that you want to move towards a path of maybe doing this, like you say, with a third-party solution or second solution rather than just the default web UI, or is the idea to eventually build the web UI for users?
Yeah, the idea is eventually to build the web UI for users. At the moment, we're focusing that on the TrueCommand side because it is built to take advantage of that RBAC model already and do it at a multi-system level. Because what we found is people don't necessarily want that just on one TrueNAS. They want to do it on a single pane of glass and say, I'd like to set a policy for 3 TrueNASs or 5 TrueNASs or whatever, and not have to individually administrate each one. So that's the direction we're going on TrueCommand. Now, back to the original question you posed. There's a full set of APIs. Matter of fact, everything you can do in the UI in 12.0 and actually in 11.3 as well can be done via the API. So if you wanted to write a one-time script that the user could run which unlocks a data set, that's something totally doable. Do that in a couple lines of Python or even with a curl command if you wanted to use the REST API.
Right.
Very easy. So you can definitely give users the ability to do things. As a matter of fact, we're even adding API keys into 12 as well. So you'll be able to go and issue API keys from the UI and then give that to the user so you're not necessarily giving them the root password to the box.
This is really sounding like a fantastic release. I know that in the past there have been some times where we've said hold off and wait to upgrade a little bit until things have kind of smoothed out. How are you feeling for the 12.0 release? Is it something that you encourage people to go ahead and upgrade right away? Is it something that, hey, there are a couple of changes since we are migrating to this FreeNAS core? What does the upgrade path look like?
So the upgrade path can be pretty straightforward. If you've done an 11.2 to 11.3 update, it's going to look and feel very similar. I'm actually, and I shouldn't say this, but I'm a little surprised at how stable it has been. It's still just in the nightly phase right now, which is typically the Wild West on the development side. But honestly, we've been working on this for so long now. We started the 12.0 development cycle over a year ago.
Wow.
So things like the OpenZFS integration, that has been beaten up and really tested in the nightlies for quite some time now internally at IX. We have a couple hundred users running it nightly on their systems out in the wild as well. And so far, the ZFS side has been the least amount of drama. It's the most just the new features that we're adding and fixing the little bugs here and there in the UI as we implemented those. But ZFS, you gotta give it to that team. It's rock solid. So once the porting work was done, it was brought over. It's been really consistent. And in the early days, a few kernel panics to fix here and there. But once we got through those first couple months, it's gotten better and better. And one other thing I do want to mention on the 12 side, speaking of ZFS. A big feature, which I don't think a lot of people are aware of, that we've been working to bring to 12 is something called asynchronous copy on write. This is designed to greatly improve the IOPS possible out of a RAID Z VDEV, RAID Z1, RAID Z2, etc. So that can make it more attractive where you're starting to use more of the IOPS of all the drives together and not be limited by the IOPS of a single drive. So it's able to asynchronously go and write blocks. And I'm not one of the OS guys who developed it. We have a team of guys who've been working on that, and they've done a fantastic job. We're not ready to quite publish all the performance numbers on it yet. We're still tweaking it and tuning it in the labs right now, but very interesting numbers we're seeing out of it so far.
Some of the questions that I get when I recommend that people check out FreeNAS is, how many drives do you recommend the average person or business start with? They don't have a FreeNAS server. They're going to set something up on their own. They're going to repurpose a computer. How many drives should they start with, Kris?
Oh gosh, well I guess it really depends on your use case and what you're doing. I mean, I've seen people start with one drive, which obviously you're not getting the redundancy that ZFS could provide you. Some people start with 2 and just do a mirrored pair. That's perfectly valid. If you don't need a lot of performance and you just have an old system and you want to throw a pair of 2 or 4 terabytes in there and at least get the benefits of some redundancy, fantastic. Typically what I see is a lot of people, though, tend to build 4s, 8s, kind of stick around those numbers for the first systems, and then obviously when you get into the enterprise side, you start getting into hundreds potentially. But it's not uncommon to see a lot of RAID Z2s that are 8 wide, for example, or RAID Z1 that's 4 wide, although a lot of people now shy away from Z1s. But those are some of the more common numbers we see.
If you were going with RAID Z2, is there a minimum amount of drives that you would say, here's what you really want to take full advantage of RAID Z2? Obviously, I think the minimum is 3, right?
It is. I would say you start at 5. That's my recommendation.
Got it.
There's different things. Again, Google it, and there's lots of different opinions on which ones are best to start with, and you can go through the holy wars that people are arguing,
sure,
which reasons why. But sometimes you just got to work with what you have. I'm a home user too, and I tinker, so I would start with a minimum of 5 if I'm going to do a RAID Z2, just to get the benefit.
Oh, that's great. Chris, how about virtualizing FreeNAS? I know in this day and age, it's virtualize all the things, and there's a rumor going around that you can't virtualize FreeNAS, and of course, that isn't entirely true. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the best things about ZFS is on metal. That's where it really shines. It's talking to the hardware directly. But that being said, we have tons of people who virtualize FreeNAS. It's not uncommon by any stretch. Matter of fact, one of the top things we see in our metrics is people running FreeNAS inside of VMware. There's some tips and tricks to doing it properly, making sure you pass through devices directly so you get the benefits of ZFS. So I recommend you do some reading up on it before you just go and click buttons and deploy a VM. But it can absolutely be done, and we have people doing it all over.
Chris, given the COVID-19 thing that has taken over the world, we have more and more people working from home, and these people are road warriors and trying to do their work remotely. What changes, if any, does FreeNAS, TrueNAS have in store for people that are doing their work remotely?
So one interesting thing is over many years now, we've seen a lot of people asking for or doing a lot of ad hoc ways to put FreeNAS or TrueNAS on a VPN. OpenVPN's obviously the de facto one that most people use, but starting in 12, we've actually brought that into the platform natively. So via the UI now we'll have the support where you can go and run OpenVPN either as a server or as a client mode and use it to connect into your OpenVPN network. That's something we've had a ton of requests for over years now. And we're really excited to make that happen because it just makes it easier. Now you don't have to go and set up or follow an ad hoc set of scripts or have your own infrastructure. You can just, with a few clicks in the UI, go ahead and either deploy your own OpenVPN server, so host it right on the TrueNAS core image yourself, or if you already have the infrastructure, just connect it in. So that's a big win for people, especially with everyone being remote. I know we're all using VPNs constantly now.
Obviously, these are the kind of things that people want to see integrated because it makes it easy for them to get these services up and running. But I'll just ask, as a best practice, what do you recommend, Chris? Do you recommend that users, if they're going to be primarily remotely accessing a file system, would you say that the best practice would be to VPN right into the file server? Or would you recommend that you run a separate OpenVPN instance on a separate box for from compartmentalization and then access the FreeNAS over the local network through that VPN?
Sure. So there's two ways of looking at this. If you can compartmentalize it, if you have your own infrastructure, most businesses already do. They're running that on their switches or routers. They have VPN baked in and through different infrastructure. Great, use it. And that's what a lot of people do. But a lot of people run, TrueNAS, FreeNAS at home, and maybe they don't have that extra infrastructure. They don't have the luxury, and we've seen more of this, people taking TrueNAS out on the road. We've had some crazy scenarios we've seen of people actually having TrueNAS boxes out in the field doing things like video recording, where they maybe don't have all the luxury of all the extra infrastructure. So being able to do it natively on the file server is an important feature.
Chris, what new features have been introduced into FreeNAS that maybe allow people to give a little bit more granular control over where and how people can store data? I mean, we set up a FreeNAS box that had, I think, 24 terabytes, something like that on it, and we found out that there was an employee in there that was storing a bunch of movies on there. Is there any way to lock that down maybe a little bit?
Did you get plexed? That's what it sounds like. Well, actually, yeah, that's something we've had a lot of requests for over the years. the ability to do ZFS-based user and group quotas. So that is something we have added to TrueNAS Core to 12.0. You're going to be able to set that now natively in the UI. You've always had some ability to do that at the command prompt. There's also quotas you could set on datasets and zvols, but not necessarily at the user group level. So this is the first time we've exposed that officially, which again, there are going to be some cases where you just really want to enforce that at a per user or per group basis. So that's going to be important to a lot of folks.
Kris, anything else people should know about FreeNAS Core 12.0 that comes out? When does it come out?
So we're just entering our internal alpha cycle right now. So that's our quality team is going through and kicking the tires, testing all the new functionality. We're looking at probably 30 days to go through those cycles, and then we'll go with a public beta. Beta, I don't have a date on it until we get through the internal alphas, but we're looking at probably mid to end of May, maybe June-ish, just depending on how many things we end up having to fix that we find internally. But it's definitely around the corner. We really pushed hard. I know 11.3 is still fresh. A lot of people haven't even upgraded to that yet, but we really wanted to speed things up this time around. You know, having 12.0, the FreeBSD base there is important for us as well. A lot of new hardware is supported, behaves better with Ryzen's, for example. So yeah, there's reasons to get that out in the wild as soon as possible, and we're working hard to make that happen.
Kris Moore, he is the VP of Engineering at IX Systems. FreeNAS, the product, turning into FreeNAS Core along with TrueNAS. You can find more at freenas.org. Kris, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the program and explain these exciting new changes and some of these great new encryption features that are coming out. This is really exciting. We'll get you back on the program real soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Noah. Anytime.
Again, open phone lines this hour, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Nathan writes in and says, I just want to start with, I've been listening to you for years, and unfortunately, I've made a bad mistake. Not with listening to you, but with some networks and backups. I have some questions over some recently purchased gear I purchased, as well as some gear that I was given to me along with moving forward with what I currently have. So just a quick breakdown. I had a Western Digital MyCloud, and I was transferring photos from it. Moving, not copying. And we had an electrical storm in the middle of a transfer. And all I can explain is that upon trying to get the photos back, I have half of the directories and half of the photos in those directories. And you can probably guess when I got the MyCloud, it was set up as a RAID 0, and I was not learning about this until later. I was given a Synology DS918 Plus at a huge savings, and I know you're an advocate for building your own server, which I have built my own computers and was planning on doing, but then this all happened and it fell in my lap, and I have some questions about the best way to move forward with the NAS and my storage. So let's start with this. First of all, there is the backup solution and the storage solution that you understand is the one that you should use. So if you understand how a Western Digital MyCloud, if that makes sense to you in the moment, say, hey, I understand how I can plug this thing in, my data's on this thing, it's on this one drive. That is no matter what I've ever said in the past, that is the best solution. You should always use technology that you are comfortable with and you understand, okay? So you've done nothing wrong because you were using what you understood. Now, are there better ways to make sure that you don't lose your data in the future? Absolutely. And by the way, your data's not gone. I'm going to tell you how to get it back. So when we store data on a drive, there really is no way to delete data off of a disk. The concept of deleting data is something that humans have sort of invented and mimicked because it makes us feel good to think that we can take something off when we put something on. But the truth is, once you've written data, it's there basically forever until it's overwritten. And so if you have not written any new data to your Western Digital Cloud, and I would hope that you've done a simple Google search would tell you that the first thing you should do if you have a concern about data recovery is not write anything else to the drive. The truth is, what a move is doing is it's marking those files for as that space as being able to be able to be written to again, and then it simply removes them from the table of contents. And it's actually trivial to get that back. You can use a program called PhotoRec. It's inside of all of the repositories, and so just plug that Western Digital drive into a spare laptop that you can let run for a while, and run PhotoRec on it, and I will give you a 99.9% chance that you're going to get all those photos back. Now, they're not going to be named that they were named, and they probably won't be in the same directory structure, but the photos themselves are almost certainly on that drive and almost certainly are recoverable. As far as where to move forward, yes, I like ZFS, and the last 30-some minutes spent with Kris Moore should exemplify why I am such a big fan of ZFS. And so, yes, if you have the opportunity to build your own FreeNAS box and function with FreeNAS and ZFS, then I would absolutely recommend you go that route. If you can't do that, the Synology is actually a very close second. Synology has made a name for itself in being a drop-in file server, and they do a fantastic job. And we use Synology all the time for everything from surveillance systems. Their surveillance package is probably the best surveillance package out there, bar none. And we've also used them in the medical industry for DICOM storage. And so I don't have any trouble trusting my Synology. Of course, as with any storage device, I would want it backed up 3 different places, or the data doesn't exist, probably, and hopefully maybe a couple of more. But they have it's a very feature-rich interface. It's running on Linux. It's a very stable system. They pick sane file systems, except for that little choice there in ButterFS, but leave that where it is. I would recommend you absolutely go full steam ahead with that DS918. The only thing you might want to do is you might consider rotating the drives and getting some new drives in there. Those are what's going to cost you data. And then again, long term, if you ever were going to do it from scratch, yes, I would recommend that you go RAID Z2 and go ahead and build yourself a FreeNAS box. Hey, the music, which is about to kick in, means that we are out of time, and we'll continue next week. Of course, you can find all of the articles and references that I mentioned in the show by going to podcast.asknoahshow.com. You heard about that Bluetooth adapter. You say, where can I pick myself up one of those? Well, we have it in the show notes. Also, we are asking for help with Self. If you have some time to volunteer for the Self Remote Attendee functionality, we need people to admin, we need people to moderate, we need people to just be available. We need bodies. We're trying to get Matrix and all those things spin up, and so if you have some free time and some availability, we'd love to have you send an email to volunteers@minddripmedia.com. We'll see you next week, 6 p.m. Tuesday, asknoahshow.com.